5 years now, and at the Water Center since 2003. So we've been involved in kind of at the beginning of state water planning stuff, help put state water plan together, and then sort of all the different aspects that go into that, to include regional water planning. So our group has been working with Black and Beach on, as Clete mentioned, Lower Flint, Upper Flint, and Middle Chat since day one. And then we've been doing Oconee along with CDM for the last couple of years. And really just looking forward to, expanding our work directly with the council. So I generally come and see y'all when it's time to do the ag forecasts, right? And we talk about all that. That's something that we do for the entire state. So have a lot of experience in planning and helping councils write plans and get their wishes put down on paper to where those plans can be used by EPD and others. I thought it was pretty interesting in the introduction. It's more than just sitting on a shelf, right? There's folks actually look at that stuff, and so I'm gonna kind of wrap up my
which is
remarks.
Not always the case in government.
We have
a lot of plans sitting on shelves.
But I want to, over the course of the next little bit, reinforce why what happens here makes a big difference. And so a little bit about me. I'm happy to go into more detail, Scott, if you'd like. But we do intend to have 2 folks in person at each meeting. This was kind of a transition period, so I came over along. We'll have 2 folks at your meeting. We've got a great team in place to support you as a council moving forward. And we'll be looking to do maybe some more joint work. All right, so I know y'all have done a little bit of that in the past. Y'all have obviously a great relationship across the border, right, with the Suwannee district. But within Georgia, something that we've had a lot of success with is having, for example, Upper Flint and Lower Flint have some joint council meetings because what one does impacts the other. There's an awful lot of similarity between Suwannee-Satilla and Lower Flint, and to my knowledge, y'all have never met jointly. So that's something that we're going to be working on and that we're really looking forward to doing.
We haven't met independently. We've met as a
right
conglomerate of.
Yeah.
Was there 6 councils of that?
Yeah.
About 6
that was a year.
Yeah,
it was a decade ago.
We had the kickoff.
That was a little while.
Yeah. And that's
10 years is not that long now.
That's right.
I don't know.
Especially seeing how like 3 were in a time warp or 4.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
So 10 years ago, we got together with all those guys.
That's right. But got some stuff, good stuff going on over there. Y'all got good stuff going on over here, and just a little cross pollination for everything. So I'm happy to answer questions about that, or I can sort of jump into.
Well, I said we were going to be a little loose, so here's your chance to take a shot at Mark if you want to. Mark,
yeah, I got something to duck behind too. So
either before, and I'll apologize for this not being a coherent thought because it just came to me, but either before or after you talk about the ag water use, you know, we had a meeting in Douglas eons ago, and you felt like that the modeling was light years at that particular time. We had made a big jump in the accuracy. I mean, how do you feel we are on it now as related to, say, that time? That was a while ago too. That was probably 10 years ago. But
me and you were getting old, I think.
Well, I mean, my hair says we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was a pretty good step up. I mean, where are we? Are we comfortable with it? I mean, is it much better, or was it good enough back then? Because I think we've kind of gone forward with a lot of those numbers. Yeah. So just address that now or later. It doesn't matter. You can talk about it in your talk if you like.
Okay. Sure will. Yeah. Let me, and I won't. I'll be careful not to overstep my bounds when it comes to the surface water modeling and all that, because EPD's got a whole team there. I'll talk about the inputs and then help also kind of address your question as I work through it. If that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
I kind of know the question. I just want to agree to hear.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you putting the ball on the tee.
Yeah, all right.
So, and the other thing I wanted to obviously say before I get started is we intend to stick working very closely with Shane and his team. I mean, they have done a tremendous amount of work, not just in this council, but around the state. And I don't think they'll go anywhere as far as being a resource for water planning in Georgia in a lot of different ways. So appreciate all all the help to this point, and looking forward to continue to work with you. So. All right, so, as the chairman said, very informal. If I throw something up there that you want to ask about, please stop me. I want to give just a brief update in terms of ag water demand, mostly in the form of acreage. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek at what's coming. That's something else that we do. We work very closely with Cliff and his team up the road in Tifton, manage all the state's irrigated acreage database and trying to keep up with all that. So I'm going to give you a few numbers that nobody else has seen yet for your council in terms of where we are with acreage, both surface and groundwater. We'll talk a little bit about where we are, thanks to the chairman and his point about the tools we have to manage and how those are different than they were now 15 years ago in 2010 when this whole process got started. And then I'm going to take you on a little bit of a deep dive on some really cool work that we're doing over in the lower Flint that I think can have some application here as well in the form of the Georgia Flow Incentive Trust work. So I'll try to tie it to what's going on over here and make it relevant. So let's start with ag water use, and that's all the ag withdrawal points that are permitted in the state of Georgia. So there's a bunch of them, right? There's 30,000 withdrawal points. Groundwater on the left, surface water on the right. Lower Flint sort of sticks out here, especially when you look here. We have a lot of groundwater in that upper Florida and Oxford. I know we talked about that a lot. Y'all have comparatively, in terms of percentage, more surface water as a percentage of use than groundwater over here in the Suwannee-Satilla. But it's a big deal. Cliff talked about it in his opening comments, right? Agricultural water use is the largest consumer of water in this region. Ag drives the economy down here, it drives the economy in the state of Georgia. It's really important that we're managing so farmers have certainty, and we are also keeping the streams and aquifers healthy. So that's our starting point. And I want to just give you a little anecdote to help put things in perspective. So I'm fortunate enough to get to do a lot of ag water stuff around the country. So this was actually last week, a year ago. That's me standing in a field in central Washington state. And we're standing there with the farmer who is right there. He farms many, many thousands of acres of potatoes and a number of other things. Heavily reliant on groundwater in that part of the world. And when I go places like that and I say, well, I do water planning in Georgia and we're working on water, for irrigation, I'm like, what are you talking about? I get 52 inches a year. Well, yeah, we do. Why do y'all have irrigation? Well, and I'll just talk about that in a minute. But they're sort of incredulous, and part of the reason is that's the dry part of Washington State. That's not Seattle, right, where it's raining all the time. Rains very little. Care to take a guess as to how deep that guy's well is that we're standing beside?
1,000 feet. 1,800. 5,000 feet.
Yeah, 2,600 feet. So he's pumping water a half a mile vertically. Right?
What's the altitude there?
Out of groundwater. It's a couple thousand. All right. So he's pumping that water half a mile out of the ground from a source that's not coming back. And so in order to keep them going, they're working on a plan to irrigate 87,500 acres of agriculture in central Washington from the Columbia River, and they're going to move that water 105 miles. Through a series of pipes and canals and ditches to keep ag going. So I tell you that as a frame of reference for what some of the really interesting and cool things we're doing. This water's not coming back, so they're going to move it in pipes that look like that to keep that going. Unfortunately, that's not the situation.
When you say it's not coming back, it's not recharging?
That water's not coming back.
How did it get there?
It was put there by glaciers.
Huh. Gotcha.
Right? That water's not coming back. And so I'm encouraged by what they're doing because people got together through soil and water districts and others to work on a solution, which is awesome, which is also what y'all do. But the scale at which they're having to work, fortunately, is not something that we're having to do. Our issues are short duration. Fortunately, we have an aquifer, certainly in South Georgia, but in general, the upper Florida that recharges rapidly. We don't have to pump water 2,600 feet out of the ground. And so, back to the incredulous part, they say, well, why in the world do y'all even have irrigation? Don't you get 50 inches of rain a year? Yeah, we do. And I just grabbed Macon because it was in the middle of the state. I give this talk lots of places. That's the rainfall from 1950 up through the end of 2023. And that's the average, a little under 50 at that particular weather station. Does anything strike you about that graph? Right? On average, we get 50 inches of rain. But
We got almost half one year.
right, it's either 70 or 30, right? So, yeah, we do get a lot of rain, we're in a humid environment, all that's fine, but if you look at the growing season, it's kind of a similar thing, right? So, I don't have to convince y'all as to why irrigation is important, but I think this is pretty interesting information. This is our growing season, April to September rainfall, and the average is about 22. Right? It's never where you want it. That's this year's growing season. The blue line's the average, the orange bars are what we saw. I raised beef cows, we irrigate a little bit, but I'm not a row crop farmer, right? This is terrible. Okay, that's pretty good. Wet March, we got delayed planting. April's about average, May's about average. Didn't rain at all in June, rained 8 inches in July, didn't rain at all in August, rained 8 inches in September, didn't rain at all in October. Without irrigation, that's a terrible growing season rainfall pattern.
Martin, when's the last time we didn't get any rain in a month?
It has never happened, per the Corps of Engineers, that I don't think they got any measured rain in the ACF basin for the month of October. And I know I'm being recorded back there, so I need to double check that stat. It's one the Corps gave us, it's at a specific gauge, but it didn't rain a drop at my farm for over 40 days. Now, if this was the Valdosta station, it's rained what, like 20 something or whatever, right, in September. And then y'all got 14, just what, last week? Week before last. Got a huge slug, we got half an inch, right? So the point is, and I know I don't have to necessarily with this group, that's why there's 30-something thousand dots on that map, right? And we need to bridge those dry times in agriculture to make high quantity crop and also high quality crop. So specific to your council, so a little sneak peek. I mentioned before we manage the state's wet acres database. We work daily with Cliff and his team. This is a map. I've been using the same one since the first round of planning. Why change it? Georgia still looks the same. Y'all's counties are the same. We changed all the data on it. These were the acreages that we used for the last plan that y'all approved in 2023. You see the different counties, and you can see the increase in acreage pretty well across the board. Some of them are holding relatively steady, but you know, we're seeing some increases in your area. So if we dig into that just a little bit more, and I went ahead and kept the last 2 cycles. So we got a 15, a 20, this is 24. We'll probably have a 2025 version that will be what drives our ag water demand forecast that we talked about a second ago. This gives you a little insight as to how you use that water. So total number of irrigated fields went from about 8,015 up to just over 11,000, a pretty big increase. Total acreage, there's more fields, they're a little smaller, right? So the difference in terms of percentage increase, you've added, 67,000 acres or something like that in your footprint, right, in the Suwannee-Satilla. Interesting, groundwater acreage, not surface water, right? We've already talked about that, right? Not as reliable in certain areas. This is a trend over in the lower Flint. This is a trend we've seen in a big way to the tune of over 20% decrease in our surface water acres. So y'all are kind of right in line. That's holding pretty steady. So your direct impact on streams from ag is less. By far and away, you know, center pivots is how most people irrigate. There are more travelers and solid sets in your council percentage-wise than others, but still, the easiest way to irrigate acreage as efficiently as possible is generally, you know, center pivot, if you're talking about large acreage, and that holds true. So you got about 6,200 of them in your region, irrigating about 245,000 acres. So if I recall right, and I think I wrote it on a little post-it note, I think total groundwater from ag is about 175 MGD. That was out of your 2020 plan, or 2023 plan. And your surface water is about 65 MGD. Who's to say, but I suspect that surface water will go down just a little bit, because I think we're gonna see this trend continue with surface water acreage, and I would expect the groundwater to go up. All right, so we haven't run all that. I was talking to Amy ahead of the meeting. We're in the process now of totally revamping our ag water demand forecasting methods. I mean, it's still gonna be acreage and use and all that. But the chairman talked about data and models and how they've improved. I mean, we've been metering all of our permitted ag withdrawals in the state. The law passed in '03, we started putting meters on in '04. So in some parts of the state, we have almost 20 years of data. That is highly informative. That is helping us refine the crop models we use to do these forecasts. So we essentially have hundreds of thousands of acres of research plots because we have it metered, and we know what crops are growing, and we know what soil types there. So that's helped us in a big way refine those. So you're going to see that rolling out probably late 2026 as you're preparing to update and do the review and revision on your plan. So look forward to that. The data that's going into the models, going back to our meeting in Douglas, seemed like it was out near the airport or something.
It was.
When I came.
It was in the restaurant.
Yes, that's exactly right. I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I remember that. The fact that we're able to plug in really accurate information only improves those models, right? The thing I will step slightly short of in terms of going into detail, because Dr. Wei Zhang and the modeling team at EPD can go into a lot of detail about this. We've also improved the model itself through Beam, and y'all got a little bit of that in the last round. So instead of just having a handful of planning nodes around the state, now there's hundreds and hundreds of them. It helps you be a lot more refined in your management practices and see those impacts at a much smaller level, which is really helping us on the project that I'm going to talk about in just a second. So I know that there's also some work going on with respect to updating the Florida model. All that's working, but I feel a lot better about the tools we have at our disposal and the data that we're plugging into those tools as we continue to move planning forward than we did when we started this process back in 2009 or 10 or whatever it was. All right. I'm gonna talk about Southwest Georgia. I hope I can draw a line as to what matters to you all. Everything here I use as a South Georgia example, but it all applies to y'all too, right? We've embraced water planning at the state and regional level. We have regional water planning councils all over the state that get together and do important work, right? We've talked about meters, we've talked about geo-reference databases. There were models that were run back in the late 90s that could not have been more wrong, right? And so the state said, we better go try to get a handle on this. And they have in a big way through planning and the money that has supported planning. It's allowed us to work with Cliff, it's allowed us to go to the field, map all the stuff, meter all the stuff, and put that data together. And this references Lower Flint River Basin, and I didn't run those numbers. Suwannee-Satilla, as I recall, is not quite at the 93%, but it's an extremely high number of the irrigation systems that put water out on cropland in the Suwannee-Satilla are highly efficient, right? You really have to go look for some of those old ones that are much more inefficient. that's an awesome story to tell. And it sort of begs the question, okay, well, now what? So when it does get really, really dry, and this is from 2012, 11 and 12 was kind of our back-to-back drought, right? 7 was bad, 11 and 12 was really bad. Not quite so much over here, but it's going to be dry over here sometime, right? We're going to have one of these again. And so the point is, with all the good work we're doing, with all the understanding we have about ag water use, what do we do to make sure we're protecting stream flows, aquifer levels when it gets like this? As I often sort of quip, you don't have to be, you know, a water model to understand that a red dot on that map over there is probably a bad thing, right? That means that it's never been lower for that day, right? So we set, there were red dots all over everywhere in July 2012. So it's figuring out how to manage when we have a bunch of red dots. And we want to make sure that I'm getting the wrong computer. We want to make sure that the red dot, one of those red dots was that creek on that day. All right, then we understand we don't want that. And so that's what we're working on. And I won't spend a ton of time. I've sort of lost track of time, honestly. 11:40. I don't want to just filibuster this meeting, but
You got 20 minutes, Mark.
I'll be done in 10.
I figured you could wrap it up.
Yeah, I can do it. The Georgia Flow Incentive Trust is something that we've been working on now for several years with, honestly, just the, you know, how do we take all the stuff that we've done and we know and we have at our disposal and improve our management. And so we started with an approach on doing some voluntary irrigation suspension work through a voluntary auction over in the Itchway Basin, which is kind of right in the middle of southwest Georgia. I'll show you a map in just a second. That's where we got started. So we got the Flint Drought Protection Act on the books. What are some ways that we can maybe improve that, not just for the state's management capacity, but also in terms of certainty for the farmers? But not just say, well, we think this will work, let's go try it. Like actually do the experimentation, get the field tested data in terms of working with the farmers. And so that's how Georgia Fit got its start. And then we kind of went into hyperdrive in the last couple of years with some funding through ARPA and Georgia OPB, a big project with Water Policy Center, Georgia EPD, Golden Triangle, and I'll show you a slide in a minute. There's tons of other technical and stakeholders involved. UGA is playing a big role with us. We're saying, all right, we've got this money. It was about not quite $55 million. What can we really get done? We want to, first and foremost, you know, we want to make sure we're protecting the flow in the Flint for the farmers and the natural system. But a lot of things kind of fall out of that. The first thing is something that I've been working on for some time, and a lot of us have been talking about, is a habitat conservation plan, which is provided for in the Endangered Species Act for the 6 species of endangered freshwater mussels that we have in the lower Flint, and there's a presence of some of those over here as well. On the map to the right, all of the orange line is designated critical habitat. So designated by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife as critical habitat for these mussels, meaning we need to protect that habitat. And so this HCP in shorthand is state or applicant, in our case the state, saying we endeavor to do a suite of management practices to make sure that we do not have a take, which is not just kill endangered mussels, but harm, harass, and impact their habitat, all through the whole list of things. We won't have a take of these mussels in exchange for doing certain practices, but we will, if there is some incidental take of an otherwise lawful activity, i.e. ag permitting, there's no liability. So it's kind of like an insurance policy. But it's an insurance policy for many hundreds of thousands of acres that's really important in the Southwest Georgia. So we're working on HCP. The biggest component of that is actually installation of deep groundwater wells to provide farmers an alternative source for use during drought. So we have a number of farmers up and down that green watershed, lower Flint, that do in fact pull directly from the creek. We want to provide them with an alternative source, a well from the deeper aquifer that doesn't impact flow, so they can have certainty with respect to use during a drought, but also maintain stream flow. I'll talk about that briefly. We're doing a lot of conservation planning. We're doing a ton of monitoring. We've installed a number of monitoring wells in our deeper aquifers, both Claiborne and Cretaceous. We're also looking to put a couple into the Clayton as well. Improve management, whether that's voluntary conservation, whether it's easements, that's the augmentation. We do a little bit of that down there. And then there's some pretty exciting stuff coming out from EPD, and let Cliff elaborate on that in terms of the possibilities of some additional permitting out of Florida down in that sub-area 4 region. That frankly is predicated on us getting a lot of this done, right? Because we think there's an opportunity to free up some of that. So just to kind of touch on a couple of things, this is the one that gets the most attention. Is our drop swap water alternative program and the installation of deeper wells. These are applicants. This was a snapshot of applicants from some time back. There's about 150 landowner agreements signed. Basically, a farmer saying, "Hey, I'm interested in doing this." So we go out there and do all the field work, work through the process, and I thought that one actually had the numbers on it, but I guess I grabbed the old slide. Got about 150 folks that said we want to do this. We've got what, Cliff, as of last Friday, 52 test holes. I know you sent for 52 or 53 test holes dug. We've got 13 LOCs issued. I think maybe a couple more maybe come in this week.
It's almost 20 now.
Yeah. So Cliff and his team have issued letters of concurrence to drill these wells, and we're out there drilling, right? Which is fantastic. EPD is obviously playing a key role in this as not only the applicant for HCP, but obviously the permitting agency for these wells. It's just like anything else, right? This has to go through the entire process. So for a farmer to get one of these wells that we're paying the full cost of, they have to amend their existing surface water permit to say when the stream hits a certain level, they will stop using that and go over to the well. So, you know, there's a trade-off there. They're getting the well, they also have to modify their permit. So a lot of interest in that project, and we've got a couple more years to get them in, and we're doing that. Just quickly about the HCP itself. It covers 6 species. We're looking at this is kind of a big deal that the state would actually hold this permit. There's HCPs like Cliff could go get an HCP for his farm if you want. We're not going to get one for mine, but we're looking to cover a much bigger area, which is why this has been such a heavy lift, but I think it'll be worthwhile in covering that permitting program and some of the measures that we're looking at doing. This is a list of our advisory board members. You will recognize some names. We've got Flint River Keeper, we've got President of the Georgia Farm Bureau, and sort of everything in between. Some local government folks. We've got the chairs of both the Lower Flint, which is Murray, used to be Richard, and the Upper Flint, Adam Graft, from up in Sumter County. So our councils are represented, right, in this process. And then like I said, we've got a boatload of technical folks that are working through this process with us. And the last slide that I want to end on, and happy to talk to take questions. I want to circle all the way back to something that the chairman said originally as to why this matters. So I've got a letter, and I shared this with Lower Flint, so y'all have heard this. We heard this last week. I have a letter of recommendation from this guy dated in 2013. That's Richard Royal. He was retired legislator, lives over in Mitchell County, chaired Lower Flint up until the last year or so. Carried most of the relevant legislation that's related to agriculture management in the state, and just a real champion. But anyway, that letter of recommendation said, "We, Lower Flint Council, think you need to fund this seed grant for investigating potential source switching in the Itchway Basin," which was over 10 years ago. The council was ahead of the curve on all this stuff. They supported it. That seed grant was a little $70,000 thing, but it made us ready for a $55 million thing, right? And so when you're sitting around and you're going through your plans, they can and do matter, right? So that's a pretty extreme example of one. But that picture is sort of important to me because you've got, you know, former director of EPD, Joe Turner's back in there, the current Watershed Protection Branch Chief, Dr. Anya Krasinski's in there. My colleague Kristen Rolls will be helping me with the Water Planning Council stuff, is right behind Anya. You got, I don't know, many thousands of acres of ag represented there. You got the state's wildlife biologist guy here, you got the mussel guy. They're all there is the point, right? And they're all looking at mussels out of the Flint River. And they're all saying, this matters, because it matters to the farmers, it matters to the mussel folks, it matters to the state, it matters to the feds. Flint River Keeper's behind me, he's not in the shot, Tom McCall's there. The stakeholder side of things, and not to discount data and models and all that stuff is important, but the folks are more important than any of that. And so I keep that in my slide deck to reinforce, start there, right? Start with the council, start with the folks, get them engaged, and then I think everything else will fall into place. They'll leave, that was 10 minutes.
That was 10 minutes. All right. Have a little time if somebody wants to ask a
Yeah,
question.
I'm happy to chat and
The
I'm
only
sticking
thing
around.
one thing I'll pigtail on to that is that's a good example of